Hi folks, today I want to do a video on the Wampler Triumph, and yes, I've done a couple of videos before on this, but today I really just want to focus on the two tiny little dip switches that are in the back, because they really do have a subtle but very usable effect on the overall EQ of the pedal. And I don't feel there's been an awful lot said about this. Brian Wampler refers to these as the switches to engage what he called glass, which to me kind of hints towards a presence, top end, but in actual fact it's a little bit more than that. It's a little bit more complex. And the only way I've thought of doing this is to use a couple of sound samples using a looper. I'll do one where I'm recording and playing through a clean sound, and then I will engage and disengage these little dip switches on both the smooth and on the punch settings. Now all the other controls I will keep pretty neutral. I won't touch any of the EQs, so you won't be hearing the pedal probably at its best or what suits you, and it will very much vary amplifier to amplifier, and I'll explain as I go along, hopefully, if I remember, how I use these, because it's taken me a little bit of time to get really used to dialing this in for different amplifiers. But because of these little dip switches in conjunction with the 3-band EQ, this has made this my go-to overdrive pedal. Now, for a while I was struggling to get this to beat my Boss SD1, which has been the go-to for years. That's just where my ears were going. But in actual fact, what happened was I thought, oh, there's those switches. And I took the back off to find that the punch setting, which is meant to be the one based similar on the Boss SD1, had actually been switched on. So whether at the factory or whether at, I think it was Tolman I bought this, I'll put a link below. But for some reason one was off, one was on, and that's fine. But it was throwing my whole EQ, and it wasn't quite sounding the way I was expecting essentially a Boss SD1 to sound. I wasn't just thinking it would be identical, but I was thinking, this isn't right. There's something not, I can't get what I wanted. But using those dip switches got me what I wanted. So I'll set this up. I'll play a little kind of clean riff. I'll engage the pedal, and I will then illustrate switching on and off the different switches. So bear with me. This will be a bit of a long one. So please like and subscribe before you probably fall asleep. But I think a bit of depth and details needed on using these switches and why this pedal is absolutely so damn good. So bear with me, back in a second. Okay, so I've made up a simple loop, and I've used the neck humbucker of my Kramer Pacer. So that is a Seymour Duncan Jazz, and I've just made a very straightforward little loop, and I will engage this. I'll have it in smooth mode. I won't touch any of the controls. I'll have everything on noon. Like I said, you can adjust this to suit yourself, but this should give you a little bit of an idea about these little switches. So I will start the loop. Quite straightforward, nothing too drastic. So that's meant to be, if I just stop it a second, that's the Bad Monkey side, the smooth setting. And I have all the dip switches in the off position. So Make sure I've not touched any of these. There we go, and I will engage this. And now I'll switch on the dip switch. The top one is for the smooth setting, and the bottom one is for the punch. That's off. That's on. Off. On. Now, to my ears, that seems to add a bit more of an edge and a bit more grit to the sound. It seems to push the kind of upper mids a little bit more, and personally I quite liked the smooth side with that on. It was actually making it that little bit hairier. So what we'll do is we will switch over. If I put this back to off, they're quite fiddly, and I'll switch it over to punch side. So even if this is your first time looking at this pedal, you'll hear the difference between smooth and punch. That's smooth. Smooth. Punch. And already you hear how that has really got much more abrasive. It's much brighter. Now that to me is the Boss SD1 side, without a doubt. I'm very, very, very used to using that pedal. So we'll do the same again and just start with the riff, and we're in the off position, number 2. And on. On, off, off, sorry, on, off, on, off. Now, this one again is almost shunting it the other way. This seems to push the sort of lower mids a little bit more. It seems to take off a little bit of the abrasiveness. So calling the second position glass and thinking it's going to increase the sort of top end fizzle, for me sounds a little bit off. It's not quite right. But what I found was when I had this, it was set on. And that's why I was really struggling to get it to sound like my Boss SD1. But the moment I switched it to off, the whole thing livened up. It became a bit more visceral, like an SD1 does. It's not as smooth as a Tube Screamer, nowhere near it. So I'll just do that one more time. So I'll put it to off. And this is my preferred setting. You can hear that top end spike. And very little low end. It's very, very tight at the bottom. That almost rounds off the tone a little bit. That's off again. And on. So the next thing I'll do is I'll do a heavy crunch riff, and then I'll use this as I would normally use it as a boost, and we'll go through the same process again. Little bit long-winded, but bear with me. Back soon. Okay, let's move my savings out the way. Right, I've now got another riff set up, and I'm using this more like I would as a boost. So I've got my gain level down a little bit, my volume level boosted up. This is not like a Boss SD1 or a Tube Screamer. If you max this up, the output is insanely high, so you've to use a bit of caution. The EQ is very powerful. So I've used the crunch channel of my PV Ultra because it's quite a dark sound, and it's one that does take a boost very well. So I've used the lower gain setting of the crunch channel, and the gain knob is only halfway. So everything else is set as I normally would, and here's the riff. And now the pedal on in smooth mode. And in punch mode. Smooth. Punch. Okay, so with that alone you can hear how the punch has got this little bit more top end, and this is with all the dip switches in the off position. So I will make sure we are in smooth, and I'll let you hear the difference again. It is a little bit more subtle when you're using more and more gain, as it obviously would be. But again, this should give you an idea on some of the voicing options. That's off. On. Off. On. Off. On. Okay, again, I don't know how much the microphone is going to pick up of this, but in the room what I hear is when it's off, it sounds a little bit more like a full range overdrive. It's not quite bumping those mid frequencies as much. The top end is almost irrelevant in a way. It seems to be a shift in the whole EQ, and in the smooth setting I prefer it on with a little bit more mid pushing, and that works really well. Now on to the punch setting. You can hear an increase in the gain there as well. Off, on. I've got no noise gates on or anything, so this is just straight in, and I'm just using its battery with this little Engel power bank, just so it's easy to show. So we are now in the punch mode and in the off position, and here's the same old boring riff again. And on. off. Okay, make it a bit quieter. What I find is when it's in the off position, you have less low end. There's the lower mids aren't as pushed, and the low end isn't there. It's really shelved off as if it was a Boss SD1. The top end is really crisp in the off position and a little bit more rounded off. I would say how I feel this is when I have this in the on position into some amps, the PV being one, which is a very dark amp. The Ultra Plus is dark. It doesn't like the on position as much. It's just a little bit almost cocked wah sound. Close enough. That's the best description I can give. And it just loses that visceral hairiness on higher gain tones that the Boss SD1 really enhances for, you know, pinched harmonics and lead work. It really jumps out, and to really tighten and focus your rhythm playing. Now, if I'm playing into my Jet City JCA50, which is a Soldano Soldano hot rod circuit, it's the opposite. If I have this set off in punch, it has got so little low end that it's almost a harsh tone. But by having it on, really suits that amplifier. So that's essentially where I'm going with this. These dip switches will really let you shape this pedal much more than even the 3-band EQ does, to suit whichever amplifier you have. And I can give a great example with the 4 I have here. When I'm using the Bugera, I like to have in punch mode, which is the one I use the most. I will admit I've not really used smooth that much, but in punch mode I like the dip switch on when I'm using the Bugera. I like it on when I'm using the Jet City, which is the Soldano circuit. I like it off when I'm using the PV Ultra Plus, and even if I'm using very high gain, I still prefer that off, and I prefer it off when I'm using the PV Windsor. It's absolutely fantastic when it's off into the Windsor, because the Windsor is like a hot-rodded Marshall JCM 800, and it can get very loose and very flubby in the low end, especially when you're really pushing the gain. And because this in the off position, down there, has got so little low end, it is absolutely gorgeous for really tightening up that amp. So this is it. If you've got a dark or loose amp, you have a setting. For me, that's off in punch. If you have a very bright amp, you can warm up the whole EQ by switching that on. Now, this is where the talk of it being called glass, I know that you have to find some way of wording it, but it's almost as if the smooth mode has got more top end when it's on and more mids when it's on, but the punch end has got more low end and lower mids when it's on. So it's not the same for both switches, which is great because it gives you so much more in the way of options. You've got 2 distinct voicings for smooth and 2 distinct voicings for punch, so you really can tailor this pedal to suit whichever amplifier you're using, or if it's running into a modelling amp, or if you're using it to hit another overdrive pedal or a distortion pedal. You have so many more options. The noise floor of this as well, I will add, is less than the Boss SD1, and the output is higher. So if you ever think, I like the sound of the Boss SD1, I just wish it would hit my amp harder, with this, when you've got that set to off, and you set your level that at about 11 o'clock is unity gain with your amp. So anything above there is really beginning to hit it hard. And then of course with the Boss SD1 I tended to add a little bit of gain as well, just to add that clipping, and it adds to that real visceral hairiness. So there we go. I'll do a quick sort of farewell in a second, but thank you very much, and I hope that's of use to you. Sorry it goes on for a bit long and it's a bit of a repetitive riff, but I think it needs illustrated because I've not found many videos really showing those switches in action. So thanks a lot. I'll just sign off. Hi again. Right, so that's it. I hope that's been of use to you. Any questions, please ask. I'll do my best to answer. Have a discussion about it. Tell me what you think. Have you got one? Have you found these switches actually? Because now it's been a year or so since this was launched. The talk about its features seems to have kind of died off. And I do wonder if people are actually aware of how versatile those switches actually are. So I'm going to sign off now, enjoy the rest of my day off, and I'll have something for you again very, very soon. So please like and subscribe, it always helps. My numbers are beginning to go up a bit, long way to go, and busy summer ahead, so I better get to it just now. So thank you very much, an absolutely phenomenal bit of kit, and the longer I'm spending with it, the better it's getting. So anyway, have a great weekend, great week whenever you're watching this anyway. Have a great day basically. Thank you very much and bye bye.